everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today, I want to talk to you about internalized transphobia, a topic that perhaps I don't discuss enough because it's really important topic. Just like transphobia that exists out there, internalized transphobia also exists for very many of you. So let's discuss this topic of what exactly is internalized transphobia, and most importantly, how to spot when internalized transphobia does take place, and also what to do about it. Again, just like transphobia, internalized transphobia exists. Transphobia, commonly known as, well, easily described as a phobia of transgender individuals, is a response, is a way of relating or reacting. It's a way of engaging with individuals who are transgendered. It's a way of engaging in individuals where that response, the reaction, is coming out of deep-seated fear, often cultivated by social constructs, social stigmas, things that have been told and perpetuated stereotypically about what transgender person is. All of the negative, horrible things you can think about. Well, internalized transphobia, on the other hand, is when a transgender person themselves or non-binary individuals themselves, anybody who identifies under this big wide umbrella of transgender identity, internalizes transphobia, internalizes all of those negative, stigmatizing, oppressive, stereotypical, painful, horrible things that are floating out there in the world about transgender individuals, about transgender identity, about what it is to be a transgender person. So what does it mean to internalize all of the things? Does it mean that suddenly you have transphobia towards yourself, that you fear yourself? Well, not exactly. What it means by internalizing is that you're taking all of these things, all of these attributes that are being told about trans person, and you are starting to hold them inside of you to the point where you believe those things are also true about yourself, where you're also starting to think that some of the elements that are out there that you hear are now things that may be true about yourself. This is why internalized transphobia is so painful. And it's really hard to detox and clean that, because the deeper the internalization, the harder it is to clean. In fact, if you think about it, another common example is that we tend to internalize a lot of things. We tend to internalize racism. We tend to internalize body images. Women tend to internalize all sorts of things about body shapes, body sizes. So there's a lot of things that we tend to culturally internalize that are based on stigmas that exist out there. For trans individuals, for all of you, in my opinion, internalized transphobia for older folks, the older you are, is going to be inevitable. What I mean by that is, well, it's kind of hard not to start internalize some of the shit you hear that is constantly exists out there in the world in relationship to your identity. It's hard not to internalize that. I'm hoping that the younger generation, maybe, I don't even know, to be honest, God, I want to say 10 years, but I'm thinking, who am I fooling? Maybe longer than 10 years. I don't know. But I'm really hoping that the younger generation are not going to continue to grow up in a climate and environment where all of that stuff is being said and stigmatized in such a way where they're going to internalize it. But because transphobia and the view, the binary view, and the dehumanizing and complete attempt to obliterate and negate transgender identity and transgender humanity, and because that tends to still predominate, and it's so systematically and it's so embedded in the fabric of our world, just like in the videos that I did before on gaslighting, it is so embedded in our world. It's difficult to eradicate. For that reason, it's almost impossible not to be affected by it because it is everywhere. One only has to turn on the news. One only has to come across, unfortunately, a very conservative commercial on this channel that's showing a recent documentary of Matt Walsh to get triggered, to get affected, to get a dose of transphobia. So as a result, as you can see, it's everywhere. It is everywhere, and it is really, really embedded in the fabric of this country. So it's really, I just want to acknowledge that it's important to realize that internalized transphobia is kind of like an inevitable thing. And I don't want to freak anybody out who hasn't or feel like you haven't experienced it yet, but I just want you to realize that a lot of the shit you believe about yourself is things you internalize because you've been told those things about yourself. But things we're being told about ourselves are seldom true, especially if they're things that are meant to oppress a minority groups are going to be seldom true. So a lot of you I know carry internalized transphobia, and internalized transphobia can be really difficult. It will manifest in your lives in two following ways. One of the ways that internalized transphobia will manifest in your life is by you experience in relationship and experience to yourself. A very common example is at the start of gender exploration, a lot of people who identify as trans femme will engage in feminizing behaviors through clothing. And when you feminize, and I have a video of this, and some of you have seen this video, when you feminize for the first time, you, not all of you, but some of you will look at yourself in the mirror and you will say, this is a man in a dress. I look hideous. I will never pass. Who am I kidding? Well, what's really speaking through you is internalized transphobia of exactly that. Trans people are men in dresses, right? This is what society, this is what some portion of very transphobic society tells us. So this is how it will come up for a lot of you. It will come up through your own experiences with yourself. Maybe you have started to masculinize. Maybe you have started to present as non-binary identity. Whatever it is you're doing, it will come in relationship to yourself, where you will have the dialogue with yourself, where you will see yourself in this very negative. It's almost as if you're echoing inside of your mind, you're echoing societal descriptions of transgender identity. When you catch yourself echoing descriptions of societal what constructs, what they deem is transgender identity, inaccurately so, recognize that this is internalized transphobia. And it starts with recognition, where then you can start addressing and working on how to detox it. And the challenging part about it, and I hate to say this, the minute we detox one layer, another layer will come in, and then we detox it, and then another one come in. Again, because we live in a world that it's so embedded in the fabric of our society, unfortunately, very, very unfortunately. The second way is that you can recognize that you have internalized transphobia is through projections onto other people. Most common ways that you have internal transphobia is when you are seeing another trans person, another transgender individual, and you're judging them. And you're thinking all of these horrible things in your headspace about them without even knowing them. Let's recognize that when we look at another person, first of all, we don't even know what their gender is, do we? Because we haven't asked them. So for all you know, it could be in your mind's eye that this person is not, what I hear a lot of people say, not working their transition, but in fact, it could be that you're looking at their gender identity and gender expression. And so we oftentimes tend to do unto others that which is done unto us. So projections and spotting ourselves in projections is important ways of recognizing that we have internal transphobia. I'm using we because this includes me too. I have internalized transphobia, and I know this, and I'm open about it, even though I work in this field and I care about all of you deeply. Again, because Once you detox one level, society pushes another level, and it's constant work on ourselves. So it's important to spot those projections. And the way to spot those projections is by recognizing when are you, when are we, when I am judging other people. When we're looking at other people and we're judging their gender, their presumed gender, we're judging how they look, how they express themselves in their gender expression, their gender identity. Those judgments are our own internal fears. Those judgments are oftentimes your own internal transphobia speaking very loudly and clear because you are afraid that you will become whatever it is you're afraid in relationship to transgender identity. And socially, we've been told a lot of things to be afraid of, right? Under the umbrella of transgender people. I mean, society will not portray amazing, amazing people, amazing transgender individuals who are doing amazing work, doing amazing things, living amazing lives. Instead, society will cherry pick to portray, sadly, to portray people who struggle, to portray people who don't have resources, to portray people who are, the most common one comes again and again. We see this in the fucking news. This poor person that is already struggling, that doesn't have resources to maybe go through electrolysis, and they're struggling, maybe even embodying their gender identity, and they get misgendered again and again and again to the point where then they publicly burst out, they react, understandably so. I mean, who wouldn't? And then society latches out on that footage, and then you see it across all of those platforms, and you see it again and again and again. This is a very common one. And the reason why this happens is because, again, they're cherry picking what they want to feed, because they want to instill this dysphoria, they want to instill this, not even dysphoria, well, all the dysphoria goes up when people see this, but they want to instill this transphobia in all of the folks. They want to show that, look, trans folks are like this, without any context, without understanding, without empathy and compassion. What would make a person react? What would make a person act in a particular way? What will make a person's triggers go completely off, right? So when you see this, and you see this in the media, and you see this made fun of, and then you see other footages, and then you see things written about transgender people, and then you see, oh my God, it's just horrible things. You see people say that transgender people are go in a fucking bathrooms like I mean, you know what I'm talking about. All of those horrible things, right, that are meant to instill fears, that are meant to make the rest of the society that are unfortunately not self-aware enough to be discerning, to be able to learn for themselves for transgender identities and what people struggle with, but to show this very small outlet of individuals who really, really struggle, and to paint everybody else like that. So again, when you watch things like that and things like that being presented to you about your identity, you will internalize it. And again, it's very painful to internalize things about yourself. I see internalized transphobia in every single client I work with. I see it through the way they talk about themselves, the way they describe themselves, and I hear it when they are projecting onto others. I see internalized transphobia on media. I see it in the comment section. I see it on this channel in the comment section. The way sometimes some of you talk about other individuals. The way sometimes a lot of you talk about yourselves. It's okay to have internalized transphobia. It's okay in a sense that I wish it wasn't there, but it's okay in a sense that it's not your fault. When you exist again in a world where all of the things are circulating around you, it's very difficult to be unaffected. This is why I always say is that in my opinion, at least, to be completely, to be a person that is just absolutely not having any racial prejudice or is not a racist, I think it's also impossible because it's so systemic, it's so woven in the fabric of this country to look at particular individuals in a particular way. Same thing with internalized transphobia. So to spot it when you are feeling it in regards to how you talk about yourself. Notice that the way you're naming your potential outcome, or the way you're naming where you're at right now in your gender exploration or your gender path, whatever you want to call it, you are using societal stigmatizing terms to label it. And you're doing unto yourself what they do unto you. So just be aware, just be aware that happens. And two, spot yourself when you are projecting onto others, and judgments of others are our biggest projections. And just stop yourself and just say, whoa, I don't know anything about that person. I don't know anything about their expression, their presentation. I don't know anything about their life. All I know, they're trying their best. All I know, it's really none of my business. So we need to work on ourselves, and we need to bring into our life more of that which we want others to do toward us, right? I don't want people to judge me without knowing me. I don't want people to make assumptions about me. I know they will. But because I don't want to, I try very hard not to make assumptions about other people. When somebody comments something on my channel and the comment may sound personal or mean, or I try to have a little bit of a step back, and I don't have all the context. I don't have all of the information. Same thing for you. So recognize, those are going to be your two markers to recognize that you have internal transphobia, is the way you treat yourself and the way you treat others. Now, what to do when you recognize you have internal transphobia? Well, biggest step is becoming aware. Because when you're aware, you can course correct. How is course correcting works? So you're aware that you talk to yourself in a very transphobic way. Reframe it. Reframe the way you talk to yourself. Reframe the negative dialogue into more realistic, more positive one. I'm not talking about coming up with some BS for yourself, but also what you're telling yourself is also not true. So reframing, be compassionate to yourself, be kind. Journal, write things down, process things. If you're in therapy, bring it to your therapist. Have them help you process all of the things. What happens when you spot yourself judging others? Again, your biggest thing, and my biggest thing, and all of our biggest thing is awareness. When we're self-aware, we can stop ourselves. When we can stop ourselves, we can take a step back. It's all a matter of rerouting your brain, rerouting the way you think, rerouting the way you see. Just like I started slowly to reroute myself, that when I see an individual and I have no idea what their gender is, even if hypothetically I can assume, and maybe somebody will say, well, isn't it obvious what you're assuming? I stopped assuming. If I don't know somebody's gender and I don't ask them directly and they don't tell me directly, I use gender neutral language. Was it kind of challenging to do it in the beginning? Yeah, because my brain is very programmed to see in binary ways. Now I notice myself that not only do I do it in a gender neutral way, but I kind of getting to the point where gender becomes really insignificant in sense of the first information, the first data points that I take about the individual person. This is what it means to deprogram your mind. And you can deprogram your mind too. Again, the way it works essentially is catching yourself in the act and then sleeping an alternative that is healthier, that is better, that is less negative. It's the same way when you reroute yourself and habituate yourself to take a different route of driving to work. At first, it's uncomfortable and you keep wanting to automatically, unconsciously take the route you used to take. And eventually, the new route has become so in place in your headspace that you do it now unconsciously. You don't even think about it. All the while, your first route is still there. The same thing. You training your brain to not judge. You're training your brain to recognize when you're being transphobic towards yourself, when you're saying towards yourself, and you're training your brain to stop, to reverse, and to reframe it. This is how detoxing happens. This is how we start working on ourselves. This is how we get better. Because there is, and all of you know, a lot of internalized transphobia in transgender community. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of criticizing. There's a lot of, you're not trans enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough. I know this because I see it, and I know you know this too. And it all starts with ourselves too. So if you don't want others to assume and misgender you, you also need to work on yourself in regards to people within your community. So this is what I have to say on internalized transphobia. Again, recognize when it happens. It usually happens the way you treat yourself and the way you treat others. Those are going to be your two biggest signs. And work on it. Detox it, clean it out, just like doing anything else. You want to stop judging your neighbor, stop judging your neighbor. You don't know your neighbor. You want to stop judging other people, stop judging them. When you see other people and your mind goes into judgment, catch yourself and say, hey, none of my business. I don't know. Lots of things are out of context. The same thing happened. Comment below, let me know. Have you, and I know you have, how do you spot your internalized transphobia? Do you spot it oftentimes in conversation to yourself, or do you more often spot it in regards to others? I spot it a lot of times when people talk about other trans folks. It comes out through, a lot of times it comes through comparison, but also spot it in people when the ways they talk about themselves. The narrative is very negative and very stigmatizing, and it's really sad. So comment below, let me know how you spot internalized transphobia for yourself. If you started working on it, what helped you? If you haven't started working on it, it's never too late for us to be better human beings. It's never too late for us to be more wholesome, more self-aware, more compassionate, more mindful people. We all have that capacity, and there's no excuse not to have it. It's not that difficult to reframe ourselves. It's not that difficult to stop judging others and to stop judging ourselves. So comment below, let me know what your biggest struggles are with internalized transphobia, and I will see you all next time. Bye.